afternoon, everyone. My name is Krista Costas Bradstreet. I'm the Director of Partnerships and Policy for the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association, or CPRA. And I'm thrilled on behalf of the organization to welcome you today to our webinar to discuss the reopening of multi-use facilities. Obviously a very important and timely topic right now for everyone across the country. So thank you so much for joining us. Before we actually delve into the webinar, I want to just give you a very brief introduction to CPRA, and then after that, I will turn the remainder of the webinar over to today's speakers. And joining me for part of our introduction is Donnie Rosa, and I will introduce Donnie shortly. So, in terms of CPRA, these are our 3 strategic goals, and CPRA has been around for about 60 years. And we are a national voice for parks and recreation, advancing the collective interests of our members. We are a national network dedicated to the well-being of people, communities, and the natural and built environments. And we are a service provider for our members and partners that cultivate dialogue, learning, and innovation. CPRA is definitely a collective organization with the strength coming from our 13 provincial and territorial partners. So we work with 13 CEOs from each province and territory, and then we also have board members from those 13 provinces and territories as well. We work with partners from different sectors across the country, education, public health, sport, physical activity, transportation, all to help us forward those goals that I mentioned previously. Our staff is small and we're spread out across the country. We have a CEO, myself, we have a communications director, a director of programs, and an administrator. Over the past, I guess, several months, since about February, March, our focus, our areas of focus have really been around COVID-19 and trying to provide support for the sector. So what we've been doing is weekly calls with our provincial and territorial members so that we can find out what's happening regionally and identifying the needs of our sector. We've been monitoring, updating, and guiding, hopefully, federal government aid programs. So doing a lot of advocacy work for financial support for the sector, both in what was the immediate need and now the recovery phase. We are working with some national partners as well to align those advocacy efforts. We're sharing as much information as possible and ideas on social media. And these webinars have also been one of the tools that we've been using that came about as a result of hearing from the sector and what they were looking for. We are always looking for your ideas and what you might need in terms of additional support. So if there's anything else that we can do for you, please don't hesitate to get in touch. You can see the info@cpra.ca link below. Please feel free to get in touch with us. I want to introduce Donnie now, and Donnie is going to make a few remarks and welcome you and tell you a little bit more about our upcoming portal. Donnie is the General Manager of Parks, Recreation and Culture for the City of Coquitlam, BC, and one of our newest members of the CPRA board. So over to you, Donnie.
Thank you, Krista. And actually, it's good morning here. So good morning to anybody joining from the West Coast. Thanks to everybody for attending today. CPRA, as you know, has been hosting these webinars, connecting us around these common issues. And really, it's been in response to what we've heard from the sector, from you. So thank you for being here. Our members in the provinces and territories have been hosting these types of webinars as well. And this work's meant to complement, not to duplicate that work. So we appreciate all the work that's going on behalf of the provinces and territories, and this work to join us at a national level. Our intention is to share information, as I said, from a national, multi-jurisdictional perspective, and of course, recognizing that we're all in different places on this journey. I've heard somebody refer to it as we're all in the same storm, we're just in different boats. So depending on where you are across the country, you're at a different point in this journey, but we're all in the same journey. The webinars will be relevant in different ways to each one of us for that reason. And so we hope that you find them to be very useful. Finally, I'm going to take a moment to share some exciting news, an announcement that The Bench, this is CPRA's new online platform for the sector, which will result in enhanced information sharing and dialogue that we all are craving, not just right now, but we've always craved it in our sector, and I think going forward it's more than ever relevant for us to have this. So this is scheduled to launch at the end of or early next week. We're hoping at some point next week this will be launched, and it's very exciting for all of us, but it should be also exciting for you. So we invite you to share this amongst your teammates and your colleagues so that we can make sure that this is a resource that's well populated and well used. The current portal will be replaced with a more functional and easy to navigate and interact with, which we all know that's really important today with zero time and lots of portals to navigate. So we want to make it as easy as possible. In the short term, the platform will focus on COVID-19, of course, and the recovery and reopening of our sector. However, over the remainder of the year, as we hope to recover over the remainder of the year, it will become an online hub with a resource library, communities of practice, a job board, links to research projects, events calendar, a framework for the portal, benefits hub, and a list of professional development opportunities, or the framework for recreation. So we invite you to visit this portal, to add it to your favorites, make it part of your professional development planning and part of your work week. So thank you again for joining us today, and we hope that you enjoy today's session. Back to you, Krista.
Thank you so much, Donnie. Before I introduce our first speaker, I just want to mention the format for today is that we will have all three speakers present, and then at the very end, with about 10 or 15 minutes remaining, we will open it up to questions. So throughout the webinar, if you would, start to just ask your questions in the box that's part of your control panel, and we will be monitoring them, and then I will ask the speakers the questions at the very end. If there's a specific speaker that you would like to hear from, just maybe indicate that in the chat box so I know who to ask the question of. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Terry Pichet. Terry is the Technical Director for the Ontario Recreation Facilities Association. Terry has been in the business of recreation for over 40 years, having experience at all levels of operations and management. In his role at the Ontario Recreation Facilities Association, he works with experts in the fields of ice and refrigeration, aquatics, buildings and grounds, and management to help identify, document, and disseminate the latest information on recreation facility-related industry best practices. Terry develops leading edge education and training sessions and teaches in a number of ORFA professional development courses. He's been an invited speaker at many recreation industry events across Canada and the United States. He holds both the Certified Recreation Facility Professional and the NHL Recognized Certified Ice Technician Professional designations. And more important than anything, he's a Toronto Maple Leaf fan. So over to you, Terry.
Thank you, Krista. It's my pleasure to be able to join the CPR family today. And I want to build on quite a few of the comments that Donnie made in her opening address, because we are definitely on the same page. For those of you who do not know who the ORFA is, we're an organization that's been around since 1947. And currently we have about 7,200 members that belong to our organization. Every one of the provinces and territories would have a similar organization. And each one of us right now are going through different challenges that have come along with COVID-19. So much like your own workplace, every organization is trying to figure out how we are going to exist moving into the future. So it will be important that all of us receive your membership support for us to be able to survive and be able to provide the services that you've learned to enjoy. So like my introduction has suggested, I've been around the business for a bit, and my job with the association over the last 20 years has been helping develop best practices and guidelines and have our members navigate the regulated responsibilities of recreation, which can be very complex at times. And if we've learned anything here in Ontario with COVID-19, trying to dissect the information that's being shared by provincial government is just as difficult as all the other legislation, because our members are trying to figure out how best to move forward. As indicated in the opening comments, I hold several designations with the association, and ORFA is one of the organizations that embraced credentials or accreditation more than 25 years ago, and we have professional designations for every one of the silos that we believe represent recreation. So grounds, aquatics, ice, refrigeration, and administration, and we've been delivering accredited courses for more than 25 years. So the information that we had in our training programs already has us pretty well positioned to be able to deal with COVID-19, because COVID-19 is merely one more virus, a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more active than the other stuff that we've been dealing with. It's a little bit ahead of athlete's foot, but there are other viruses and bacteria, and I don't have to preach to those that are in the aquatic business. So on the next slide, we're going to talk about multi-use facilities. So there we go. Maybe we'll head to the next one. So that's the topic that's here today. And ironically, that when it comes to multi-use facilities, what I've learned with COVID-19 is that there are currently no experts. So it's all open country. We're plowing brand new fields. Everybody's trying to figure out how they're going to be able to move forward. And what makes it difficult in our industry, and again, I'm preaching to the choir here, is that no two recreation operations are the same. So we can't come up with one plan that says, here, follow this, giddy up, you're going to be fine. So every recreation department is designed differently, and the infrastructure is different. And what COVID-19 has done is it has put a bright light on some of the issues that we already knew existed in recreation. So before COVID-19 popped its ugly head, we were focused for 2020 on biofilm and Legionella, which are, again, two different elements that were impacting silently in recreation. And some of you would have been up to date on what I'm talking about. If not, it gives you an understanding of the complexities of everything that's going on inside our business. So what we've done is we've designed or redesigned or retooled all the information that we had in regards to the other bacterias and viruses that we were dealing with, and then we have allotted it into COVID-19. Next slide, please. So what we do know, and again, I'm most likely preaching to the choir, is that we had poor cleaning and disinfection practices in most recreation facilities, and that's not to call anybody out. That's just the reality of it. Value engineering and inadequate facility design has started to cause some problem, along with aging infrastructure. So as we try to deal with cleaning, disinfection, and sanitization, we know that we've got some problems in regards to what we've inherited for infrastructure, and we're going to have to try to assess and evaluate every operation on a case-by-case basis. One of the things that we're finding is binding everyone together is trying to figure out how waivers are going to play a role. So for those of you who are risk reduction educated, we always try to shift some of the responsibility back to our user groups or our users. So the redesigning of waivers to try to deflect some of this responsibility is one of those interesting ones that we're dealing with. And then ultimately the revenue generation components in regards to how we're going to pay for all this, because recreation historically has always been pressured to come up with the money that we require when it comes to extra costs. So we're focused in on providing not only our members with the tools that they need for meeting the demands of COVID-19 in regards to cleaning, disinfection, and sanitization, but also giving them some direction in regards to how they're going to try and generate some revenues. Next slide, please. So what we've done, much like every other organization out there, is that we've created a specific toolbox on our website, and anything that we come across that we think that's interesting is that's where we put it. That's its home, that's where it lives. We focused in on two different aspects when it comes to COVID-19 for our members. And what we did was we said, look, before we can reopen, we got to re-enter. So what we tried to emphasize to our members, because a lot of them were employed to other parts of the operation, is that we need to get our staff back in and we need to get our buildings. Many of us abandoned our buildings in midstream in March. They were still in operation. And some just walked away and let the ice melt. Well, given all of the controls that come in place, we needed to make sure that we could get back in the buildings, prep the buildings, and be ready to go. And most senior management don't realize that this could be anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the complexity of the design of the recreation department. So like everybody else, we've got into the webinar and the podcast business and tried to keep our members up to date. And what we immediately developed in was a learning management system, and we have released online training for our members on cleaning and disinfection so that they can have a very strong foundation in respect to the core responsibilities in respect to maintaining recreation facility infrastructure. So we built on some of the information we already had in place and then redesigned it for COVID-19. And then what we did was all our certification programs, we've updated the materials to make sure that COVID-19 in fact is included in our professional designations. Next slide, please. So what we know in the province of Ontario is that we're a very big province, much like the other provinces and territories. And the message that comes out from provincial government that is then controlled by the public health departments and other governing agencies from border to border in the province allows for a lot of flexibility when it comes to applying what the province has done. Now, lots of complications in regards to the messages that we got from government, but I'm going to give the government a little bit of latitude on this one because there's no playbook for this one. On May 18th in the province of Ontario, the government came out and said, look, at figure skating can now go back to work. And that was in basically the early stages of phase 2 or late stages of phase 1. So it was great that they came along and said figure skating can go back to life, but rinks were currently still shut down. So it created a vast amount of information, and our members come to us looking for direction, and we definitely didn't have it. And then it became that much more complicated when they started to open up swimming pools. And it's amazing the conversations that we've had with practitioners because they're trying to figure out things like, do they have to wear masks when they're in the swimming pool? But it seems that once you dissect all the information that comes from the province, that you don't have to wear a mask. But then the whole complexity of showering on deck, in a change room, outside the facility. And I had the smile yesterday on one of the podcasts that I was attending in regards to what was going on, because somebody said, well, nobody's using the washroom at our swimming pool. And my response was, well, trust me, they're using the washroom, but they're not using the washroom. You just might want to test your water a little bit more. So it's not easy. And then we've got members asking us, well, how are we going to disinfect our playgrounds and other outdoor infrastructure? And those rules have yet to be made. Next slide, please. So some of our legacy, the good thing is that we've had provincial and national organizations at least reach out to the facility operations and say, look, we're not going to create protocols in regards to facilities. We really need your help. So we've always struggled in regards to having a direct line to provincial and national organizations, and we seem to have a very clear conduit now. So that's going to make things easier. And what we tried to do was have a coordinated approach in regards to how everybody was going to do it versus everybody coming up in regards to the way that they were going to conduct business. So we've forced our association to be creative. And like I said, we've responded by trying to provide the information directly to our members, much like the other provinces and territories. Next slide, please. So ultimately, when it comes to working with the way that we are conducting business, the ORFA deals with partners. Partnerships are essential in regards to the way that we conduct business. So anything that we put out as an organization, we've always gone out to our partners. So when we came to the aquatic side, we went to Canadian Red Cross. When it came to the sport field side or the ground side, we went to Sports Turf Canada. When it came to risk management, we went to Frank Cowan and Company in regards to their expertise to help us reduce the risks when it came to working inside our facilities. So as much as the association gets to put their moniker on the way that we conduct business, the reality is that we rely on partners. So we watch what other associations are doing in each province and territory. We lend our information, and what's really neat is that we, as Donnie had indicated, we really are family. And although we may have different emblems on our shirt, the reality is that we all come from the same grassroots organization, and we're all committed in providing the safest, most healthy environment as possible, which makes it simplified for a very complicated world. I mean, ultimately, what we try to do as an organization is meet the challenges, and this challenge is unique. One of the things that I try to emphasize when it comes to a multi-use facility is that there's anything that's going to bind every piece of infrastructure for a building that has everything under one roof, it's the HVAC system. And the HVAC system is going to be one of those things that we need to get control of because it's going to spread the air from one end to the other. So depending on the design, the complexity in regards to the HVAC system, we're going to require skilled staff and a really good relationship with professional organizations and our mechanics and suppliers to be able to ensure that the HVAC system is working properly. So if there's anything that I can leave you as a takeaway, that if you have not invested time on trying to figure out your air quality and your HVAC system and the maintenance, and is it going to be actually adequate enough to be able to deal with it, this has got to be the largest area that we're focusing in on with our members in regards to multi-use facilities. Most of the other information when it comes to COVID-19 is transferable, depending on the infrastructure and the design and the maintenance. The skill levels and the education remains exactly the same. Now, the other thing that I leave you with is that we have not always done a good job in regards to training our frontline staff. And we confess our sins. We know that our frontline, call them what you want, janitorial staff, or cleaners. We've referred to them most recently as our environmental services team. And right now they're actually carrying the largest weight in regards to our ability to be able to do the things that we want to do. So we got to be sure that they've got the tools and equipment to be able to move forward, to be productive and to meet the demands. And then lastly, as my closing comments to you, is that unfortunately, I'm afraid that each one of us has got to be prepared to shut down again at a moment's notice. So please learn from what potentially could have been improved upon when we closed down in March. And if you haven't created a shutdown procedure to ensure that the building is going to be adequately taken care of if we have to shut down again, I've got to leave you with that one as a priority because we had the luxury of heading into spring and summer. The next go around, we're moving into fall and winter, and it's going to give us a whole different perspective. We're not going to be able to get to walk away from these buildings. We're going to have to make sure that we're maintaining them based on the geography and the temperature that you're dealing with, and being prepared to be able to move forward. So I thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon. You got some other great speakers lined up. I'm looking forward to hear what they say, because they're in the trenches and they're the ones that in fact are grassroots to the way that we conduct business. So I'm going to turn it back to your host at this point and wish you all well.
Thank you so much, Terry. And so I'd now like to turn it over to Phil Christie, and who is again in the trenches, as Terry mentioned. Phil is the Director of Community Recreation and Culture Services at the City of St. Catharines. He joined the city in 2013, and prior to that worked at the YMCA of Greater Toronto as General Manager of Health, Fitness and Recreation. He has worked in the recreation industry for over 30 years. Born in the Philippines, but having spent his youth in Toronto, he now lives in Niagara Falls with his wife and kids. He enjoys playing basketball. As a fan of Toronto sports teams, I didn't line it up that way. Like, I didn't pick all Toronto Maple Leaf fans. Trust me when we get to Gary. And is also a New York Yankees fan. I don't know how that got in there. So thank you so much, Phil. I turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon for some of us. So greetings from Niagara Falls and the Niagara region. So just a quick introduction about St. Catharines. So we are one of 12 lower tier municipalities here in the Niagara region. We have a population of just under or just around 135,000. And our demographics are shifting a little bit in that our population is aging. And so as we speak about our facilities, the end use of the facilities had been changing before COVID, and so we are anticipating yet another possible shift related to that. So, but thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. MJ, next slide, please. Oh, yep, next slide, please. Thank you. So at the beginning of this pandemic, the City of St. Catharines sought to look at the light at the end of the tunnel, if that was possible, and we decided to put together a team, a staff team, and the staff team was tasked with putting together a recovery plan. And the recovery plan, next slide, please. Oh, sorry, I went back up one. I'm sorry. Thank you. The plan and the objective of the recovery plan was, as you see on your screen here, to define and develop recovery strategies to reopen our facilities and resume business. So how do we do that? Well, we sought the feedback from internal and external stakeholders, and we wanted to follow the directives from not only the province, but from our local Niagara region and also from public health. Next slide, please. In April, the province of Ontario released a 3-phase plan to reopen Ontario, and in phase 1, a targeted response aimed at support and relief, followed by phase 2, which was a gradual and staged restart of the economy. We're currently in this phase, and phase 3 is aimed at long-term recovery. Interestingly, phase 2 has within it several stages as well. So let's move to the next slide, please. So where are we at? On May 14th, the province announced the implementation of stage 1 of phase 2, the reopening of selected workplaces and permitting some small gatherings. The process remains a gradual and responsible and evidence-based approach. We're currently still in stage 2, but with some restrictions being lifted. Our beaches are now open, sports fields have begun to open, and splash pads are now open. And in and around the region here in Niagara, outdoor pools have also begun to open. Indoor multi-use facilities can now be open, but we as a city here in St. Catharines have chosen to follow a gradual reopening strategy for multi-use recreational facilities. And I'll speak to that in a couple of slides. And in addition to this, City Council has sent out a pretty bold message in that they've directed staff to freeze all rates and fees for next year, and also instructed staff to prepare a zero tax increase based budget in addition to the traditional budget process. So, which means for us that we really need to be careful as to what we do how we do things now, not making any assumptions as to any bailout money from the feds or anything like that. We really wanted to approach this in the most conservative way, which may or may not open us up for some criticism later on. Next slide, please. The recovery plan team had 3 pillars to work with. And as you see here, one was economic, the other organizational, and the other one health and fitness. We really wanted to get a sense from both the prospective users for each of these pillars, but also from the staff team that we're going to be tasked with delivering programs and services in our facilities, and how they might be impacted by considerations and assumptions being made within these pillars. Next slide, please. So as an example, this was identified in one of our working groups. This is an example of a scenario that was identified in the necessary steps towards specific deliverables. So in this example, what do we need to do to ensure the continued health and safety of staff as they start to work our facilities as they gradually reopen? So we wanted to hear from staff that they were going to feel comfortable and safe and stay positive as they return to their respective workplaces. So one of the first things that had to reopen as a result of the very warm weather that we're having right now here in Ontario were our cooling centers. And we really needed to put some standard operating procedures in place, not just to keep our staff safe, but also to provide them with an environment in which they can function and communicate with those using the cooling centers as a respite from the warm weather. Next slide, please. So this is an example which has become really a norm for most of our facilities. We're still working on some others, but the plexiglass barrier that you see here in this slide has become the norm. This is a picture of our legal and clerks department at City Hall. And what was typically an open counter where documents could be exchanged freely has now been changed to have this protective barrier in place between staff and members of the public. And so in this scenario, for example, unless otherwise mandated by the Ministry of Labor, staff can go about their duties without any PPE or any even cloth masks to wear in this example here. We are progressing through the list of facilities, and we're, it's not a one approach deal where a design can fit in many places. It's going to be different for every place and every facility that we have. And so that has taken some time and resources to figure out what our next steps are. Next slide, please. So the one thing that we have been able to do is stay consistent with our signage, and that these are two examples here of what we've placed in and around of our facilities. And the first guinea pig, if you will, with regards to these signs was our farmers market. We opened our farmers market third week of May. It was the first one to open in the region here in Niagara. And we worked very closely with our public health folks as well as our farmers market vendors association to make sure that we had appropriate signage and appropriate approvals from all levels, and also buy-in from the respective stakeholders. We wouldn't have been able to open our farmers market without the buy-in from all fronts. Next slide, please. So this, the list on this page shows the facilities where the City of St. Catharines offers programming to a variety of age groups, and, as well as the two performance venues where large crowds typically gather. The dates beside each facility name indicate the target opening date for each, obviously contingent on regional and public health approvals. Of note, the Meridian Center, the second bullet there, is poised to host the Canadian Elite Basketball League, which has 7 franchises across the country. They are wanting to put together a summer showcase, so it's basically a basketball tournament that will be held here in St. Catharines at the Meridian Center in August, all contingent on the province opening up stage 3, which means a tournament with no fans, basically. And so the 7 teams will be based here in the region. They will have separate practice facilities, and they will be not quite the same bubble approach that the NBA is taking in Orlando, but somewhat similar in that they're going to be local here with no fans. The Seymour Hanna Entertainment Complex is our 4-pad facility. So to Terry's point, we are getting pressure now to open arenas. We have yet to open arenas. We have yet to put ice back in, and so that will take some time for us to figure that out and paint lines and all of that stuff. So we have been subject to some criticism in that we haven't yet put ice back in. We have decided not to open pools, our outdoor pools and our indoor pool for that matter. So we have received some criticism, and it's mounting now. In fact, our city council will be discussing opening our pools and perhaps arenas at our next council meeting on Monday night. Our community centers are slated to open September 1, as you see here, but we're actually taking a more conservative approach with our older adult centers, in that we're gonna we're going to stage the opening of those centers a little bit later than in the rest of our community centers. So we're saying that a minimum of 30-day separation between the opening of our community centers versus our older adult centers. So the October 1 date could even be pushed back depending on, further outbreaks or success from the other community centers. And the last two there, as I mentioned before, was our Market Square, which houses our farmers market, which opened in May. And again, we were subject to many, many inspections from our public health folks and a lot of buy-in from the internal and external stakeholders. The one facility that we have really yet to get a handle on is our Performing Arts Center. It has 3 performance venues within the building, the largest of which seats about 750. So we have no idea yet as to when we can resume operations there. They have made plans to do outdoor offerings, and one of the ideas is a drive-in movie setup, as well as virtual concerts that they're going to be streaming via YouTube starting next week, as a matter of fact. Just to go back again to older adult centers, what we have found is that the virtual programming approach that we've taken since the shutdown, since the pandemic started, has really been successful. So although we're talking about reopening of facilities, we feel like our older adult centers haven't really shut down. In fact, we have been able to reach out to even more older adults who have been shut in, and we've been able to contact them via phone. And our virtual programming, which we adopted from a program in Ottawa, actually, is called Senior Centers Without Walls. And we have used basically conference call technology, some Zoom technology, some Skype, and we've been able to offer programs virtually via phone and video, which has resulted in increased participation in many of our programs. In fact, all of the programs that we're offering virtually has seen at least a 50 to 75% increase in participation, which we're really happy about. So even when we open our doors literally to our older adult centers, we believe that we're going to have to continue the virtual programming as a way to reach out to even more older adults moving forward. Next slide, please. So, St. Catharines being a smaller community, we've been impacted in a very significant way. The approach that we've decided to take with our city council is one of cost mitigation and safety. Again, we've been open. We opened ourselves up to criticism, but that's the approach that we've taken. The impact to us has been that the deficit to the city of St. Catharines resulting from this pandemic is just over $10 million. We have had to lay off staff, close facilities, and cut expenses. And so those cost mitigation strategies have resulted in us being able to, at least on paper, lower our deficit to about $6.5 million. Again, not expecting, but certainly hoping for some relief financially from the federal government. So to add to that approach, we informed council that we would only reopen our facilities if, one, we were able to keep our staff and members of the public safe. Two, are we able to maintain the level of safety and cleanliness that would be required to keep those facilities open? And three, what is the overall impact to the community? If we're opening facilities really early and yet we're exposing ourselves to further risk, what is the impact and consequence down the road? What is the impact and consequence down the road for us financially and to our taxpayers? And lastly, how do our internal and external stakeholders feel about the approach? We, quite surprisingly, our user groups, the folks who rent our fields and our arenas, have been very supportive of the approach that we've taken. Yes, we're getting some pressure now to open, but really we have been able to communicate with them on a regular basis, and they've been supportive of the approach and the conservative reopening strategy that we've adopted. And thank you. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak, and I would welcome questions at the end of the webinar.
Thank you so much, Phil. That was a great presentation with lots of information packed in there. So I'd like to now introduce Gary Dewar, currently employed as the Director of Community Recreation Centers with the City of Edmonton Citizen Services Department. Gary is responsible for a collection of vibrant community hubs that collectively attract over 4 million visitors each year when they're not closed due to pandemic. In addition, Gary is responsible for 3 senior centers along with emergency preparedness, public safety, and security for community and recreation facilities. Prior to his current role, Gary led a team responsible for admission, retail, advertising, sponsorship, sales, and strategic marketing for the City of Edmonton's recreation centers and attractions. Gary has enjoyed making a difference in the lives of Edmontonians for over 30 years as a proud public servant, having worked with a diverse range of department staff, community agencies, and corporate partners in an effort to increase participation and revenue in a variety of recreation programs, facilities, and services. He's also an accomplished social marketing practitioner where his focus is on influencing attitudes and behaviors around a collection of important social issues. So thank you, Gary, for joining us. I'll let you explain your hockey affiliation and I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. It's my great pleasure to be with you today and to share some of the City of Edmonton's experiences with reopening recreation opportunities. Next slide, please. So here's my contact information, and I'm going to speak about a lot of things. I probably won't get to everything I'd like to, so feel free to reach out to me if you need further information. And by the way, while I grew up and went to university in Ontario, as Christy indicated, I have no allegiances to any sports teams in Ontario, and in fact, I'm a diehard Oilers fan. And our city, as it turns out, is very much looking forward to being an NHL hub city and hosting both conference finals and the Stanley Cup finals. Thank you very much.
You know I can mute you, right? You know I have the ability to mute you.
All right, next slide. So I thought I'd start with a summary of events which got us to where we are today. On March 11th, as we all know, the World Health Organization officially declared COVID-19 a pandemic, and within days, March 14th to be exact, all City of Edmonton recreation facilities and attractions were closed. Our province would declare a state of public emergency the next day. Teams of staff in our facilities were charged with notifying thousands of program participants and rental customers about their cancellations and processing the associated refunds and credits. Thousands of our customer memberships at attractions and recreation centers were contacted, and their memberships were put on hold. Our new membership management system thankfully helped automate this program. And to date, we're quite happy that of our 45,000 memberships, only 2,500 have been canceled so far. We worked very closely with our facility maintenance services area to orchestrate the closures of our facilities, which, as Terry suggested, was not as simple as just turning off the lights and locking the doors. They've organized pool drainings to save on utility, performed a whole bunch of deep cleaning, and thankfully we were able to identify opportunities to advance preventative maintenance activities to take advantage of our shutdowns. We then focused on the work, quite frankly, that nobody relished, that being determining our base staffing requirements. And in the weeks that followed, over 1,700 staff from the City of Edmonton's community rec facilities were laid off or volunteered for redeployment to support other areas requiring seasonal labor in our corporation, including waste management, golf courses, cemeteries, a chart conservatory, parks, temporary shelters for our city's homeless populations, and then of course others opted to stay home, taking care of themselves and loved ones. The province of Alberta announced a staged reopening plan in early May, with the select opportunities permitted to reopen effective May 14th. City of Edmonton golf courses would be among the first of our opportunities to reopen here in Edmonton, followed by the Edmonton Valley Zoo as part of the Stage 1 relaunch. In both of these cases, the experience changed dramatically for both staff and patrons. On June 9th, the government of Alberta announced that recreation facilities, including pools, gyms, fitness centers, and arenas, which were originally included in stage 3 of our provincial relaunch strategy, would be able to relaunch as part of stage 2. While we had begun our reopen planning, this advanced reopening timing kind of caught us off guard. And on June 12th, that date was identified for stage 2 commencement, but it would certainly be a few weeks before rec center doors would reopen. And I'll talk more about that a little later. Next slide. I won't spend a lot of time on this slide. It outlines Alberta's pandemic response, and there's links embedded into it that speak about the various stages, but there were, like other provinces, 3 stages identified. And to support safe reopenings, the province introduced a collection of general and sector-specific guidance documents and public health requirements to reduce the risk of COVID-19 among staff and customers that are operating in those various sectors. So as I said, the links are connected in this slide, and I understand you're going to get a copy of this, so I won't go into much detail on that in the interest of time. So maybe next slide, please. So a community and recreation facilities branch recovery planning team was established to guide the reopening of facilities and services. The committee, which I co-chair, has been focused on building and executing a strategy to guide the restoration of our branch's collective facilities, programs, and services. We've established a growing collection of resources for our service providers, from planning templates and environmental scanning research to tracking AHS, Alberta Health Services announcements, and ensuring our internal stakeholders are engaged as we prepare to relaunch various opportunities. We are working to ensure collaboration and consistency across the region and have been stimulating the reimagining of how we do business. Next slide. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this reimagining, knowing that it would be some time before we would be in a position to reintroduce our facilities, programs, and services. Our team started thinking of creative ways to deliver our experiences. In an effort to keep our recreation center members engaged, we produced a collection of workout videos featuring our most popular fitness instructors and posted them on our Facebook page. The videos proved more popular than we would have ever imagined, and many of them have received over 10,000 views. We built on the success by offering more diverse content, including arts activities for kids, nutritional education, healthy recipes, science experiments, and more. Our reimagined opportunities included virtual registered programs for the first time, like babysitting courses for youth, where our instructor will teach content over Zoom. The programs have proven very popular with students who appreciate the convenience and customized approach. Like other reimagined opportunities, we expect these programs will continue indefinitely, well beyond COVID. As outdoor group gathering sizes here in Alberta have been allowed to increase, we've taken our popular group fitness classes like Zumba and yoga outdoors. And again, the demand and interest really surprised our program team, and we are continuing to expand those outdoor offerings. Early spring, the Matar Conservatory, Edmonton's premier horticultural attraction, offers a plant sale opportunity. The event is very popular and has proven an important revenue source for the city attraction, which is currently closed for renovations. A very large inventory of plant materials had been secured and was prepared earlier in the year, so canceling the event due to COVID was not really an option that we wanted to explore. But nor could we offer the program in the way it had been delivered previously, with hundreds of gardeners cramming their way into our tight, compact facility to shop for their plants. So while creating an online plant sales platform might not seem that extraordinary, but given the fact the city only recently adopted this new merchandise management program and point of sale program, it was a big deal for us and took a lot of effort. In any event, with just 10 days notice, an online catalog was created and 60% of the available inventory was sold in the first day. And by the end of the program, we exceeded any sales targets we had reached in the past, and I guess it suffices to say the event was a blooming success. That was a pun, by the way. So not much time passed after closing the doors to city recreation centers when we started to think about how we might approach reopening. 2 slides ahead, please. Closing facilities was hard. Reopening them has proven much harder. As an organization, we put in place some principles to guide our work for any services that we are considering reopening. Our first consideration is, can we adhere to the orders and guidelines? If we can't do it safely, we're not going to do it. Can we afford to relaunch the service within our fiscal realities? I mean, this has taken its toll on the city's finances, and we quite frankly just don't have the resources to offer what we previously did. And I could say that respecting the demand and desires of the public and sport groups to get back into the facilities has been a challenge. We're also planning to be able to dial things back if there is a second wave and we need to quickly respond to changing public health conditions and new orders. And finally, we need to ensure others in the organization who support us are able to provide the support we need to relaunch successfully. So we'll just maybe move on. Our recovery committee that I spoke of earlier has considered the following when proposing which facilities we would reopen first. So we've looked at our collection facilities and are ensuring that there's geographic access. So regardless of where you live in the city, you might have access to their facilities. Certainly some very clear directives around guidelines and health orders from the province. Financially, as I mentioned earlier, we don't have the financial resources we had previously, and so we've got to consider what it'll cost to reintroduce the opportunities. And as you all know, there's additional costs associated with enhanced cleaning, patron marshalling, and of course we have now reduced capacity, coupled with an expectation on this to ensure the opportunities are made affordable. Public demand has been a tough one as well. Just how interested will patrons be in returning? We've conducted quite a bit of research in that respect, and we know that we're not going to welcome back the same number of patrons that we enjoyed prior to closure. Probably really important is our readiness operationally. It's not as simple as turning on the lights and opening the doors. We've got to work with a whole bunch of resource areas to get ready, and that includes our facility maintenance services area. We got to fill our pools. We've got to get our water tested. In our case, we got to work with our human resources colleagues to recall hundreds of staff and train them in a completely way of operating. We want to certainly align with other providers in the region to ensure opportunities are complementary. And finally, we want to build on the insights from others, including those who've opened before us, like our golf courses and the zoo in Edmonton, that I've already mentioned, along with others in Canada and our associations and content experts like our OH&S folks, our facility maintenance services, corporate security, life saving society, and other municipalities. Next slide, please. So using these considerations, a phased approach to sequentially and gradually reopening select rec centers was established. We created a briefing note that spoke to the facilities, amenities, and services to be introduced in phase 1, and that had to be approved by our executive leadership team. The plan identifies a reopening sequencing approach, safety protocol, staffing requirements, offers a detailed business case, outlines legislative guidance, provides a pricing structure, and our operational plans. Next slide. Here's the outline for phase 1, our current phase. Select arenas in Edmonton started reopening as of July 2nd based on rental demand, and more will be introduced as required. Note that arena use is limited to rentals only at this time, and the demand has been overwhelming. Many user groups are following the return to sport and return to play guidelines, and we've welcomed back many user groups in a very safe manner in our facilities. Fitness centers and gymnasiums, access to 4 of our principal community recreation centers began just early this week on Monday, and another one of our facilities will open up on the 13th. Gymnasium use is at this point limited to racket court sports, namely pickleball, and badminton that are played by cohorts. Our aquatic experiences will be introduced to rental groups at one of our facilities on July 13th, and then more for the public later in the month on July 20th. At this time, rental opportunities are just limited to arenas, gyms, fields, and aquatics, and more opportunities will be introduced in later phases based on demands and budget. We haven't decided at this point which facilities those will be or which dates will be utilized for future openings. Next slide, please. So certainly it's not business as usual for our staff. And as I mentioned, we've had to recall 350 staff to return to work. A number of those staff had been redeployed to other areas in the city, and so there's been sort of a domino effect of impacting other areas that were using them as their seasonal support. So there's been challenges there. Certainly, as we've discussed already this morning or this afternoon, a number of new COVID safety related protocols. Our staff are involved in these daily assessments and how they report when they're reporting to work. A completely new work hazard assessments had to be conducted, and OH&S orientations, and a whole bunch of new procedures training. We haven't touched on it, but even the way we perform first aid has changed due to COVID. So a lot of our staff, again, have been away for some time. And as you may know, a lifeguard with unable to access water needs to get their fitness back and be able to be comfortable in the water. So that's just all part of the challenges and why it's not business as usual for staff. And then the next slide, please. It's certainly not been business as usual for patrons. So as I mentioned, not all facilities and amenities have opened at once. Our operating hours have reduced. Our operating of amenities have been staggered, providing breaks for deep sanitation and time to clear out and welcome new patrons. Our amenity occupancy has been dictated by Alberta Health Services. Patrons will not have the opportunity for spontaneous access to our facilities. So we've introduced a time entry reservation system, which is completely new to our public and patrons, in order to manage the number of people accessing the facilities and also create time slots to allow enhanced cleaning throughout the day. Entrance is being managed through an online time reservation system. Our facilities will accommodate very few spontaneous drop-in patrons, and guests who have not reserved in advance will be admitted if facility capacity permits. Upon arriving to the facility, patrons are screened and with staff verifying they have a valid ticket and confirming they meet the entry requirements, i.e. they haven't been out of the country, they're not feeling ill and what have you. This new software application was configured over just the last few weeks, tested and launched last Friday through a website called movelearnplay.edmonton.ca. Our fitness center and gymnasium access times are broken out into blocks of 75-minute intervals with 15-minute breaks. When our pools open, lane swims will be this 30 minutes in length, those access time, and our public swim, which are dramatically different in terms of what they were before, are 60-minute time slots. Operations staff manage the patron traffic flow within our facilities to ensure we're reducing congestion in our common areas. And we've made a whole slew of physical changes to our fitness environments. So we've spaced out the equipment. There's no access to change rooms and showers, and only limited storage and locker opportunities. And all visitors, as I mentioned previously, are required to be pre-screened before they come in. Just, I know we're running out of time, so I'll just touch briefly on the next slide. We've re-examined our pricing and really lowered it because our patrons aren't enjoying the same collection of amenities as they once did. So really reduced the pricing, and so it's as cheap as $8.50 for a 75-minute visit to one of our fitness centers, or for a 30-minute lane swim, or a 1-hour public swim. We've given our members a whole bunch of options. They can keep their memberships on hold, they can cancel their membership, they can have it activated again, so lots of choices there. And we continue to offer our leisure access program, which provides free admission to economically disadvantaged Edmontonians. And of course, that number of percentage of our population has been growing due to the state of our economy. Finally, I'll just get to one last slide here and suggest that the results have been proving very promising. So we've got 4 facilities that opened up their doors on Monday, and about 75% of our capacity has been enjoyed by our patrons. We've had some system glitches. We've been able to troubleshoot that. We've been making some adjustments on the fly based on our early experiences. We've been getting great reviews and feedback from our patrons, high satisfaction levels. Certainly, there's been mixed reaction amongst the public and even internally within our staff that, is this the right thing to do? Should we have reopened? Are we compromising anybody's health and safety? And we have worked so diligently to ensure that's the case. Our approach has been overly cautious, very, very careful and methodical to ensure that there is no risk posed to staff or patrons. And it's just been a delight to welcome back the staff, our family really, that were laid off and had been away for so long, and also to see patrons return to our facilities. So that's the status here in Edmonton.
Awesome job, Gary. Holy smokes, you pulled that off in the nick of time. That was great. Thank you so much. And I'd like to invite all of the speakers to come back on. And we just have a couple of questions. I know Phil has to go. So Phil, one of the questions I think is for you, and that's around the virtual programming for older adults. Are you able to charge user fees and recover costs?
So we have chosen not to charge for those virtual programs at all. Yeah, so we're not recovering costs at all. But the staff that we have had to lead those programs are the staff that are obviously not the ones that have been laid off. So they're all working from home. So we're trying to mitigate costs as well. But thank you for the message.
Thank you. I just wanted to address that all of these, the presentation is recorded and it will be available on our website. All of the webinars are available on the CPRA website, so you will, and any materials that are made available to people through the speakers are available. Slides are available as well. Question, do you have multiple activities or programs running at the same time? Not sure if that's for Gary or Phil. I don't know if one of you guys wants to take that. Do you have multiple activities or programs running at the same time?
So in Edmonton here with our facilities, our actually drop-in, our programs like Zumba and fitness are all happening outside. We're not staging those in our facilities. So there's no instructor-led programs within our facilities. They're all being accommodated outdoors.
So most of our facilities haven't opened yet. So the answer for us is no, not at this time. But we don't anticipate sort of cross-programming and sharing of spaces or anything like that. We don't anticipate that happening.
I should mention as well, when our aquatic facilities reopen, we are reinstating swimming lessons, but in a very different format. They're private swimming lessons or they're in cohorts, so you can actually have a family swimming lesson. And registrations have been pretty high so far. We've been pretty impressed. Again, a completely different way of delivering a program. So new to all of us, but yeah, the uptake has been good.
Just to add to Gary's point there, sorry, I know we're running out of time here, but one of the approaches that we want to take for aquatics is to have older adults only type of programming earlier part of the day or at some other part of the day.
Awesome. I'll ask a couple more questions. If people can join in for a little bit longer, great. Otherwise, we will definitely have the recording online for people who do have to run. My apologies for going over. Phil, can I ask you one more question? And that is around what type of virtual programs for older adults have been provided?
So one of the more popular ones has been our yoga, but we've also had the lunch and learn type of talks, how to use Zoom. All those kinds of things that we've been doing in person, face to face. We've been, the only things that we haven't been able to do would be the card-based games that we or shuffleboard or anything like that. Pickleball obviously can't do virtual, but anything that we could do tabletop, anything that we can think of, we've tried to introduce it virtually. So, what I can do is share with you a calendar of our virtual programs.
That would be great. And then is there a way that you cover the insurance for the virtual programs?
Great question. I don't think that's come up, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I know for our programs, there certainly is a disclaimer by the instructor at the top of the class that acknowledges that they assume the customer assumes liability, and we will hold ourselves harmless, so to speak.
Okay. And one last question is, during the relaunch, have any of the three speakers come up with new monetization opportunities to offset costs?
Well, I mentioned that the virtual program in terms of offering like learning babysitting courses and how that we charge for that. So that's a registered program. We've never really delivered a virtual registered program before, so that's new in a way of monetizing some of covering some of the costs associated with it. And those programs are 100% plus cost recovery, so they're successful in that respect.
We have not yet. No.
I'm going to suggest to you, Christy, this is an area that we haven't got to yet. It's coming, however, as municipalities try and figure out their finances, they'll definitely be at the recreation department. And I'm afraid that we're going to be pressurized like never before in regards to return on investment for provision of recreation services. I think it'll be an interesting landscape because every one of our user groups is going to struggle. And it was a great point by Gary. Are they going to come back? Are our user groups that were struggling already in regards to trying to maintain some of the traditional infrastructure? It'll be interesting to see if in fact they're going to be able to retain their operations. The great unknown is insurance. Insurance goes up once per year. We're locked in right now. It'll be interesting to see what happens at that point for everybody that's involved with this. Our recommendation is that you're going to have to reevaluate all of your operations. We were about to, in Ontario, we were going down a road with MPAC. MPAC is the organization that takes a look at taxation, and they were about to focus in on recreation based on the fact that many recreation facilities have entered into business relationship with organizations that use exclusive portions of our buildings that were not paying tax. So for an example, if you have an OHL team that has a dressing room, and if they've got advertisement on the boards, all of this infrastructure is no longer tax-free. You have to, it's taxable now in regards to the way that business, and a lot of this stuff was going on behind the scenes. So there's so many different pressurizations in regards to the return on investment for recreation. And I think we're going to go into, this is going to be something that every organization is going to have to spend time on. I mean, if there's an investment that can be made, it's revenue generation, realistic cost recovery, how to make those calculations. And again, the issue is we're not Tim Hortons. Every recreation environment is totally different. So trying to figure out rental rates and user fees is such a complex animal. So it'll be an interesting next few years. That next generation of practitioners, they got to learn to sharpen their pencil because revenues are going to be an important. We can appreciate the taxpayer is going to be over pressurized. They're not going to want to pay any more, and they're going to be forced to pay more. The larger municipalities have already come out and said we have to raise taxes unless the Fed shows up with a pocket full of money to start to offset this. There's only one place the municipalities can get the money to offset all these new inherited costs that weren't in the budget on January the 1st, and that's from the taxpayer. So it'll be an interesting exercise over the next little while.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and our goal is to continue to continue these conversations, and you know, so again, we've been spending time on these webinars talking about reopening, but I think the discussion warrants, or that the issues that you're raising warrant some additional conversations, and any way that we can help facilitate that, we'd be happy to do that. So on that note, again, I thank you for hanging in for a few extra minutes. Just with the next slide, I just wanted to let you know we do have one other webinar. We actually have two other webinars, but the very next one that's coming up is next week on Wednesday at 12 Eastern time, and this one is going to focus on the reopening of arenas. So if you're interested in that topic, please feel free to join us. You can get information on registering on our website, and we also send out a number of notices through social media. So three great speakers again as well lined up. And so I just wanted to thank Phil. I know he had to leave. He had to go to another meeting. Terry and Gary for three great presentations. I really appreciate the time to spend with us today and the preparation that it took. So thank you again, and to all of you again for joining us. And I hope you have a great day. Thank you, everyone.